You know that feeling, right? Where you're in a conversation, everyone's using the same words, but it feels like you're speaking a completely different language. It's this strange, isolating feeling of being an outsider, even when you're surrounded by people you know.
Yeah, it's that classic scene. You're at a party, maybe a work meeting, or even a family get-together, and yet you feel this disconnection, like there's an invisible wall between you and everyone else. Well, today, we're going to get into exactly why that happens.
Okay, so let's just dive right in, because here's the thing. This feeling isn't because you're broken or antisocial or arrogant. Not at all. Psychology actually shows us it's all about how your brain is wired to see the world. And in this explainer, we're going to decode that wiring.
First up, let's talk about what is, for so many people, the biggest hurdle, the absolute exhaustion that comes from typical social stuff. I mean, why does a simple chat sometimes feel like you've just run a mental marathon?
The first reason is a big one, and I bet a lot of you are going to nod your heads at this. It's what we can call the small talk exhaustion.
So here's the deal. For a mind that's built to crave deep connections and complex ideas, chatter about the weather or what you did last weekend, it just doesn't compute. It's like mental static, not a real connection. Your brain is basically sitting there, waiting for a puzzle to solve that never shows up.
And this just nails it, doesn't it? For most people, small talk is a tool, right? It's a social lubricant to build a connection. But for a really analytical mind, it's a total mismatch of values. You're out here searching for depth in a world that often just wants to skim the surface.
All right, let's move on to the second reason. This one digs into the real physical and mental price of socializing, because it's not just about being bored. It's about genuine burnout.
What this really boils down to is having a more sensitive nervous system. For you, socializing isn't just something you do, it's an incredibly active process that eats up a ton of mental fuel. Let me show you what I mean. What's so powerful here is seeing the difference laid out like this. While other people might get a buzz from being in a crowd, your brain is working overtime. It's processing every single thing, every tiny shift in tone, every unspoken emotion, every little gap in logic. You're simply taking in more data, so of course you burn out faster. You need that quiet time to reboot.
Okay, next. Let's get into how all this intense internal processing can actually push people away. It's what we can call the observer's dilemma.
And that brings us right to our third point, which is this really fascinating concept called hyperconnectivity.
I mean, think about it. Someone's telling you a simple story about their day, but your mind is already 10 steps ahead. You're connecting dots, analyzing motivations, predicting outcomes, and linking it all back to a dozen other patterns you've noticed before. You're not just listening to the story, you are completely deconstructing it in real time. And this brings us to point number 4, how this incredibly active inner world is actually perceived by other people. And, well, there's usually a huge disconnect.
So here's the mismatch, right? What others see is the quiet person in the corner, and they might label it shyness or arrogance or even insecurity. But what's really happening inside your head is this intense, active observation. You're not quiet because you have nothing to say. You're quiet because you're waiting for a moment to say something that actually matters.
And that brings us to our final section. This is about the core values that are driving all of these social choices. It's not just about how you think, it's really about who you are at your core.
Reason number 5, and this is a big one. It's that non-negotiable need to put truth way ahead of social harmony. This says it all, really. You'd rather be honest than be liked. You have what's called an internal locus of evaluation, which is just a fancy way of saying you judge yourself by your own standards, not by what other people think. And in a world that's often built on just fitting in, that commitment to being real can definitely make things, well, a little complicated.
Okay, up next, reason number 6. This one explains why being alone can feel so much more rewarding than being in a crowded room.
See, when your sense of self-worth comes from within, you just don't need a crowd to feel whole. And this makes you incredibly selective about who you spend your time with. Why? Because you'd much rather walk alone than settle for superficial connections that just drain your battery. And that brings us to our final point, number 7. This one goes beyond just logic and thinking. It goes right to the heart of your emotional world.
It turns out that high intelligence often goes hand in hand with what some call gifted emotions. This just means you feel everything: joy, sorrow, empathy, with a much greater intensity than most people. This depth is a superpower. It lets you understand people on a profound level, but it also makes those shallow, everyday interactions feel deeply, deeply unfulfilling.
So,
After hearing all of that, it's pretty easy to ask yourself this question, isn't it? If social life feels like this constant battle, does that mean there's something fundamentally wrong with you?
The answer is a clear and absolute no. You're not broken. Your struggle isn't a flaw. It's just the side effect of having a mind that values privacy and peace and real progress over just putting on a social performance. You are wired differently, and that is not a defect. It's a feature.
So, what's the big takeaway here? Your need for depth, your sensitivity, your quiet observation, these are not social problems to be fixed. They are the very hallmarks of a complex and powerful mind. Don't ever feel like you need to flatten yourself out to fit in. Protect that depth. It's your greatest strength.